Hi everyone, my name is Pip and I'm a self-published author, and this video is going to be about the 5 things you should know before publishing your book. If you're writing a book or preparing to publish, it's quite an involved process and there's a lot that you don't know going in. As a first-time author myself, I actually learnt a huge amount going through the process of self-publishing. So hopefully this video will give you a few ideas of things that you might need to make sure that you've got covered before you press publish. The first thing you need to make sure you do before you publish is that you get an editor to go through your work. And I know that they can be expensive, and I know that there's a bunch of different types of editors, developmental editors, line editors, copy editors. There's so many different types of editors. But you really need to get someone to go through your work. You are too close to it, and even if you've read it so many times that you want to poke your own eyeballs out, you will still miss problems, you'll miss plot holes, you'll miss grammatical errors, and you'll miss a bunch of places where commas should be, regardless of how many times you've searched for issues in your book. Now, of course, everybody's budget's different, and you would be well within your rights to skip this step completely. But the difficulty is that it's really going to affect the reader's experience, and you are just too close to it. You can't see the issues within your own book. It's very important that you get someone who's impartial, not your mom, your dad, your friends, your sister, your brother, to have a look at it and give you some fair feedback. And a little side note here, you should not be sending your manuscript off to an editor when it's at first draft. Your first draft is so different to how your book should end up. I actually shudder to think of what the original version of The Hunted was like. It was 2 books combined into one, but it was a horrible mash and plot holes everywhere, and you just need to really take time to go through it and to work on it and to try and look at it objectively and then take a break from it and then come back to it. So basically, by the time you actually send it off to an editor, you should not want to read it again. You should have done everything you can possibly do to it. You should have edited it a few times, had a little break from it, and then had another go at it before you even think about sending it to an editor. Number 2, cover design is super important. So I actually spent heaps of time thinking about cover design because The Hunted is the first book of the Phoenix series, and I intend for there to be 6 books in the series. I wanted to have a cohesive kind of look across the whole series. I wanted there to be things that link the whole series. I didn't want them to look like separate books that are all on their own and that don't seem to have any linking characteristics to each other. So if you're writing a series, I would strongly suggest you think of ways that you could bring your series together through the cover work. Now, people will actually judge a book based on its cover. That's just the way it goes. So this is an area that will usually either take up a fair amount of your time or need you to spend a few dollars to actually get the job done. If your cover is shit, there's a good chance that you're going to drive readers away, but you need to also remember that no cover is universally appealing. But in the same breath, you want to look at other covers from similar genres and similar types of books, and you want to see that your book fits in. It doesn't necessarily have to fit in exactly, because you want your book to stand out on the shelves. Now, I would strongly suggest, if you don't have good photography skills and you're not amazing at Photoshop, that you look at getting somebody else to do this for you. And cover design is actually something I cover in another video, but it can range from $100 to $1,000 to much more. Depends how much you want to spend. But what you want to do is you want to actually sit down and have a little think about what you want on your cover before you approach a cover designer. Now, as I already said, I actually wanted a cohesive look across the series, but the other thing I wanted was to make sure that the spine stood out. So often the spine is the only thing that you'll see of books on a bookshelf when you go into a shop. And I know that it's a little bit of wishful thinking to hope that The Hunted ends up in bookstores, given that it's a self-published book. But anyway, so this is the spine of The Hunted, and you can see here there are some flowers here, and this will be a link that goes across all 6 books. So the book is set on an island called Lanhyverleer, and it has 6 seasons, one of which is spring. So spring is featured on the first book. So the moral of the story is you've got all this space to use up. So make sure you think about what you could conceivably do with it and how you could use that as part of your marketing strategy. Number 3, know what your strengths are. So something that I learned in my 9-to-5 job, I'm a physiotherapist and I own the clinic that I work in and I have employees there. One of the things that I learned the hard way is that some things you're better off delegating to other people. And sometimes you're better delegating them to other people because either it's not your strength and you just shouldn't be doing it, or because your time would be more valuable or better spent doing something else. Now for me, cover design is one of those things because I am hopeless with technology. I have kind of like left a wake of destruction in my path when it comes to technology. Computers have been destroyed, phones, cameras, you name it, I've pretty much ruined everything. So with something as important as my cover, I absolutely wanted someone who had a clue to do that work for me. And regardless if you are self-published or a traditionally published author, you are going to have to put in a lot of hard work to actually get your book off the ground. And sometimes that hard work is going to be more costly in terms of time, and sometimes it's actually going to cost you some dinero. Now, my opinion on this is probably warped slightly because I own a business, but I tend to think that my time is actually really valuable because there's so much stuff I can do to grow my business if I have extra time. So it's really important to know what is worth spending time on and when you'd be better spending your time on something else. I recently joked to my best friend who helps out with lots of tech things in my life that I actually wouldn't have achieved half the things I've achieved in my life without him in the background and his wife also in the background helping me out with the tech side of life. And I kind of thought, that might get a little giggle, but he just kind of nodded and went, yeah, that sounds about right. He didn't even think it was funny. He thought it was fact. That's how bad I am with technology. So for me to do things like spending time trying to work out how to buy a domain name and get a website to redirect to the server. Oh, no. Don't spend time doing things that you are terrible at, especially not if you have a very tolerant best friend like I do, who will do those things for you. Now, if you don't have a tolerant best friend like I do, you might have to learn some of these things the hard way, but just keep in mind that you might actually know someone who can help you out with some of these things or who can give you some tips. Otherwise, there's lots of YouTube how-to videos that can help you out. Now, while it might sound like I panic moonwalk away from any part of this process that involves any sort of tech skill at all, that's not true. The part that I actually spent a lot of time trying to work it out and fucked it up 1,000 times, but eventually got there in the end, was in terms of the interior layout of the book. So how it looks when you open it up, how it looks when you open it on your Kindle device or on your phone. The reason I spent time doing this was, like I've already said, I intend for the Phoenix series to be a 6-book series. So any cost involved, I have to multiply that by 6, and I got some quotes for interior layout and they were pretty scary. And I watched loads of other AuthorTube channels, and you always see people talking about how the interior design is actually quite a manageable thing to do on your own. So I thought I'd give it a go, and there were times at which I wanted to claw my own eyes out. But in the end, I actually switched to another product called Vellum, and it was amazing. And again, there will be a video on that in the near future on this channel. Number 4, get your own ISBNs and barcodes. I know they're expensive, but if you're uploading to Ingram Spark, you actually need your own barcode and ISBN. If you're uploading to Amazon, KDP, CreateSpace, whatever they're calling it these days, you can actually get an ISBN allocated to you as part of the uploading process. The big downer about using an Amazon allocated ISBN is that if, say, a bookstore or a library went to search for your book to potentially order it, it would show Amazon as the publisher of that book. Whereas if you own the ISBN number, if you've applied for it yourself, it shows you as the publisher. So then what I did is I started my own publishing company so that I could allocate the ISBNs to In the Clouds Publishing. And so if someone searches for my book now, it looks like In the Clouds Publishing is the publisher for that book. Now, part of the reason I did this was I absolutely wanted to make sure that I maintained creative control. I wanted to make sure I retained complete ownership of everything to do with the book. And I didn't want anyone to be potentially put off from ordering the book because it looked like it was a self-published book, even though it is a self-published book. But I actually don't think there's anything wrong with it being a self-published book. But other people will have their own preconceived notions, and I didn't want that to be a restrictive factor. Every time you publish your book in a different format, hardback, paperback, ebook, audiobook, whatever, you will need a different ISBN attached to that book. And if you're thinking of publishing more than one book, so like a series, you will go through a few ISBNs, so they are cheaper to buy in bulk. It is a little bit of an outlay early on, but sometimes it's better to think of the long-term costs. Number 5, you have to let go at some point. And you have to understand that you're not going to get everything. You're not going to catch every typo. You're not going to catch every grammatical error. Your editor is not going to catch every single error either. Even in traditionally published books that have been combed over by editor after editor, they still miss things. It's going to happen, and you just have to accept that that's going to happen. If you want to be published, at some point you're going to have to press publish. And the trouble is that when you're working on something and you've been working on something for so long, you have to let go at some point and actually press publish. I have actually been working on The Hunted and the second book in the series for like 6 years. And yes, there were a couple of years in there that I didn't do much in that time because I was doing other things like opening a business and running a charity and things that consumed quite a lot of time. But you're going to have to let go at some point. And I mean, I could have kept reading it. I could have kept searching for errors. And I read it 50 million times, and I tried to edit it 1,000 billion times. And no, I'm not exaggerating. That's exactly what it felt like. But there is a point at which you need to let go. There is a point at which you have to acknowledge to yourself, you know, I could keep reading this and keep finding things and keep tweaking this. And at some point you've got to let go. You have to accept that not everybody will like your book, and you can build up all the armor you want and be as prepared and as detached as you can possibly get yourself. But it's still going to sting a little bit when the first negative review comes in. People like to voice their opinions, and I remember going to a business conference and hearing that when somebody likes your service, when they like your business, they're likely to only tell 3 other people, whereas if someone dislikes your business or has been irritated or put out in some way by your business, they're likely to tell 17 people. Now, I would think with social media that those numbers are fairly conservative. I would think if someone doesn't like you, they're actually more willing to tell a couple of 100 people. But you just need to remember that the negative voices can be very loud, and it can be hard to tune them out. So there are things you can do to help yourself with that. So you could ask your friends to read, say for example, your Goodreads reviews, and to go through them and take out what is constructive criticism that might be beneficial for you. You could do that yourself, but you need to be aware that you might also read some stuff that's not super constructive and that might make you want to cry a little bit, but that's okay. Everybody cries sometimes. Sometimes these people are going to be actually pointing out plot holes that you might need to tie up in other books if it's a series. So it's really important to take some of the feedback on the chin and listen to it and make changes if changes are necessary. Hopefully you're actually writing your book because you feel compelled to do so, because you feel a need to tell your story, and you're not doing it for social gratification. If you're doing it for social gratification, the letting go process might be a little bit more painful for you. The publishing process is so much more work than I thought it would be. It's epic, and I learned so much along the way, and there is so much information out there, and it can be hard to find information that's straight to the point and not filled with a lot of fluff. So hopefully this video wasn't filled with too much fluff and you actually found some straight to the point advice. Please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel so you will see more of my videos when I upload them. It will also help my author platform grow, and I would really greatly appreciate your support. If you're interested in checking out my debut novel, The Hunted, it is available on Amazon, Kindle, Apple Books, the Book Depository, just about anywhere.